With this panel discussion, we hope to gain insights into safeguarding our interests in the ever-evolving landscape of space security. So please join me in welcoming with a warm applause on stage the esteemed chair and moderator for this session, Air Vice Marshal Pawan Kumar, DG, DSA. May I request him to please join us on stage? A very warm welcome to you, sir. With that, may I request the esteemed panelists to please join us on stage. Please join me in welcoming on stage Dr. Bulbul Mukherjee, General Manager, Data Synthesis and Modeling, ISRO, Telemetry Tracking and Command Network, that is ISTRAC. We warmly welcome on stage Air Commodore Savinder P. Singh, Senior Fellow, Center for Air Power Studies, CAPS. We warmly welcome Air Commodore Terry Van Heeren, DSM, retired, Managing Director, Leo Labs, Australia. We warmly welcome onto the stage Tejasvi M. from Agnikul Cosmos. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sakti Kumar R., Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Orbit Aid Aerospace Private Limited. It's a full panel, and I once again extend a warm welcome to the esteemed chair and moderator and the panelists of this session. With that, I hand it over to the esteemed chair. It's over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. So I think now we are on to one of the most important topics as far as space is concerned, that is space warfare. Primarily, when we talk of warfare, space deterrence and space domination. So how we go about it is, I will keep it short. I will not take more than 3 to 4 minutes as a chair, and thereafter I would request my panelists to speak for 5 minutes each. The intention is at the end, we would like more inputs from the audience, more ideas from the audience, so that we can take some key takeaways as far as this particular topic is concerned. So as far as space warfare is concerned, we all discussed in the morning that how space has grown from 1957 till date, how the various conflicts that have taken place, the importance of space when it comes to conduct of operations, how the denial of these services, primarily whether it is denial of ISR, it is for anyone, all people who are involved in operations will understand the kind of implications that will have effect on ground, whether we talk of denial of images, denial of ELINT, electronic intelligence. You will not be able to make electronic order of battle. You will not be able to get the movement of troops on the other side, the changes that have taken on the other side, and plan your operations as military commanders. Then when we talk of denial of PNT services, whether it's denial of GPS, whether it's denial of NAVIC, IRNSS, which that is one field that as a country we are really taking off in. When you talk of denial of the communication, which is most important as far as whether it is civilian or military operations, whether we talk for society development, whether we talk of HADR, that is humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. So SATCOM is something, once again, that is important. So denial of services is something that we have to work on, and hence the topic of space warfare, and hence the topic of deterrence and domination. When you talk of deterrence, it can be deterrence by denial, deterrence by punishment. Deterrence by denial means you impose heavy costs as far as the enemy is concerned. Deterrence by punishment, this would imply that you have requisite space capability to ensure space dominance. And all this is not possible till the time we have a heavy and a coordinated interaction between, once again, between industry, military and academia. And as most of you are aware, when we talk of the information available in open media, some say that there are about 26,000 space objects, 28,000 cataloged space objects, and I was reading in one of the articles wherein it says about 1 million registrations have taken place with ITU. Even if 10% of them take off, let's say it is 1 million, you can imagine the kind of the space density we will have. And that is why space is one field that is highly congested, contested, and competitive. So the topic of space deterrence and space domination are extremely important. So I keep this at that. And now hereafter I will request my panelists to take on one by one. So to you, Terry.
Just stand up quickly.
Right.
Thank you, AVM Kumar, and thanks SIA-INDIA for hosting this wonderful event. I'll get straight into it. So LEO Labs, and from our perspective, the challenges we talked about yesterday are quite dynamic, especially in low Earth orbit. So we aim to bring superior information into what we see as our dynamic space operations, particularly in low Earth orbit. I'll just talk about the dynamicism of space operations today. In low Earth orbit, we've seen basically the doubling of the number of active satellites in LEO every 2 years since 2015. There was 200 active satellites in 2015. In 2019, it was 800. At the end of last year, there was 8,000. And we're now expecting that to double every 2 years at the rate of Moore's law. So by the end of this decade, commentators are talking about 50 to 100,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. In low Earth orbit today, satellites are manoeuvring all the time. We support the Starlink system with safety of flight. They just recently announced they did 24,000 manoeuvres in the last 6 months, 140 manoeuvres today. They don't need to tell me that because I can watch it on my system. And they're manoeuvring to hold their formation, to avoid collision with each other and space junk and debris. Adversary satellites are also manoeuvring all the time. Manoeuvring is now a normal parlance of operations in low Earth orbit. Now you ask yourself the question, what happens in conflict? That's when manoeuvres really start, because the best way of defending yourself in low Earth orbit is to manoeuvre and make it very hard for your adversary to find you. So it's a very dynamic environment. When we say we're trying to bring information superiority into that environment, I'll talk in terms of Boyd's OODA loop. Now I'm a fighter pilot and I lived and died by the OODA loop, so observe, orientate, decide and act. And we're talking about gaining information superiority and then decision superiority. In terms of observing, we're building a global network of radars, phased array radar systems. We have 10 radars today on 6 sites. They produce 1.6 million radar measurements a day. That's around about 93,000 radar passes. In fact, every second, the system is updating a track in low Earth orbit. So this is big data, and this is the observation rates you need to keep up with this dynamic challenge. As the radars push that data out, it takes actually 5 minutes for the information to come out of our processing in the cloud, and we produce a state vector and propagated state. So 5 minutes after an object goes through the radar, we work out its new orbit and update that. And conducting analysis of that object versus everything else in low Earth orbit that we have in our catalogue for the purposes of collision avoidance or for the purposes of attribution and working out what's going on. Our main aim is space safety, and our whole system is focused and built for that. And we actually do 25 million conjunction assessments every day, supporting the likes of Starlink and OneWeb and others. 70% of the operators in low Earth orbit use our system. But we also now use the analysis to look at proximity operations, indicators and warnings, potential threats in low Earth orbit. So we can set our system up to have a blue team and look at a red team and give you indications of when satellites you don't like are getting close to your satellites. We actually don't make decisions, but we decide, we're pushing into mission systems, and this is where the mission system and partnerships take over. So there might be a partnership with SpaceX and Starlink or OneWeb. It's also partnerships with various militaries around the world. And what we're doing is aim to support their decisions and their actions in low Earth orbit here, but mainly by the simple fact we're going to measure, again, through the next observation, orientation of what the outcome is and provide that information back into the mission system. And it is a continual process, and that is how you hold superior information in this dynamic environment. An example would be the Chinese space plane in orbit at the moment, the third one to fly. Currently, I just had a look at our system. We're tracking that very well, getting 9.6 passes a day, so about every 2 or 3 hours you get an update of where it is in orbit. And it's just circularised up at 608 to 620 kilometres. It's about Chinese New Year. I bet they'll take some time off, but if it repeats the habits of the last flight, you would expect a bunch of testing activity to occur after Chinese New Year. And again, we're there to collect that information, provide it to our customers there for their own missions, whatever they may be. Now, just on the question of deterrence, I don't want to go into space control and things like that, but one of the benefits of having commercial unclassified data is the ability to use it for attribution. And I was explaining over morning tea that we've had operators around the world ring us up and go, hey, we had a problem with a satellite at this time. Do you have any information? Well, guess what? We record everything. So we've gone back in time, found that the satellite was in close proximity to a debris field at that time, and most likely had an intersect with small debris. At least that answers a question, what happened, in terms of attribution. So this are the things we can offer commercially, and I think that's very important that you can do that at an unclassified level. But lastly, I'll say I think the important thing here is systems such as Leo Labs do a certain amount in the information space. We're here to establish partnerships. Mission partners is really what we look for, those that will be supporting various missions, whether they're commercial, civil or military. But we cut our sort of supply there, but we think they're very important because that's the way the industry will scale. Happy, I've actually just started a partnership with ISRO, and we're providing some test and validation data from our radars to the ISTRAC system, which we look forward to hopefully being successful in developing a further partnership here in India. Anyway, thank you very much. I just wanted to tell you exactly what we're up to. Thank you.
Morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen here. Today the topic is very, very interesting as to space domination and space deterrence. We are already talking about space dominance, which is futuristic for us because we are yet to establish ourselves from space. I'll cover as to how we are talking too early, but it's good that we must think on these lines. Even at this stage, nascent stage of space warfare that we are, we are talking of space dominance. First is, I want to highlight issue about the deterrence. The deterrence word has become a common word. Actually, it starts with the nuclear deterrence that we talk about. The nuclear deterrence is a real deterrence as of today because the use of these weapons of mass destruction raises the level of annihilation and almost wiping off of the mankind of that area or that country, whatever. So the deterrence is very high. The moot question is, do we have the same kind of deterrence in the space war? Space has been destroyed. Will it cause such kind of destruction that nothing else will work on the ground? I'll give you an example. Second World War came to a grinding halt after that, immediately after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki was dropped. That is deterrence. The fear of such kind of devastation. That doesn't exist in space today. Yes, there will be problems, that your mobiles will go off, your air travel will go off, a lot of other things in life will go off, but it doesn't stop you from living, doesn't stop. Entire Europe was rebuilt after even the Second World War. Huge amount of carpet bombing. The Europe today once again is a buzzing economy. So there is a resilience within the countries, So deterrence, when we talk about deterrence, in what sense are we talking deterrence? We must understand the level of deterrence. That is one. The second level of deterrence was mutual assured destruction. Here, both US and USSR, erstwhile USSR, had the MAD and they stopped stockpiling of the nuclears because they knew there was a mutual assured destruction at some level. And the stockpiling stopped. Will it happen in space? Just now, the chair has covered, it will get saturated. Space will get saturated, it's a kind of a set. So, will somebody stop launching satellites because there is a mutual assured destruction? No, it doesn't happen. They will continue to launch or various means or other. So the deterrence that we are talking about, we have to think in that context. Now I'll come to, when we talk about space dominance for India, I am very specific talking about to India because all this we have spoken, we are talking various countries who are into space and all. We are interested in space, India. Here I must tell that what is the threat to us in this space. Unless you know the threat, we can't build it up to space dominance that we desire. And do we have the capability? So first, we all understand our major threat is from our main adversary, China, which is way ahead of us in the space technology era today. The chair had talked about in the last year, he talked about 1991 Gulf War, where the people consider that yes, that the space assets were used, and it was a space assets used to enable the war. So the war was space enabled war. It was not a space instituted war. So there is a difference between the two. Even today we have the space enabled war if it is going to happen. So the assets are being used. To what extent they are allowed to use, to what extent they are denied the use, that is where what the chair had just brought out in his opening address, the level of dominance and level of deterrence will work. So for the China as far as concerned, I hope you all are aware, China was silently watching all these wars when they are doing, and they planned their move in such a manner that they progressed well in the space, they saw the future. And that is our threat. We must know how to counter it, how to deny them, and can we deny them, or can we reach a level of dominance that we deny them. That is of concern to us. So China, when they developed all, they straight away started with a concept which is called diode, D-I-O-D. And their concept was straight away. First D was disruption. Look at the way they think. They have started with D, disruption. Next is interference. So the level of denial, if we talk about China works on, is it first is itself is disruption, then interference, and then is the obstruction. Starting from a higher level to the lower level. And last is the, if nothing else, destruction. So this is a diode concept they have developed assets on. Similarly, China developed their entire space capability, which is going to be a threat to us, is under three very clear heads. First one was capability to enter space. That we already are. ISRO, we must thank ISRO for giving us a huge platform so many years, and we are in this space. So the capability to enter space was the first step they took. Obviously, that is the tracking, trajectory, telemetry control, building of SSA, whole lot of things, ECM. And the most important part in their capability to enter space was the cyber security. One of the audience had brought out yesterday the question, cyber hardened. Very, very pertinent. While we have done the capability of entering space, cyber hardening is nowhere. What the China has developed is exactly with the cyber hardening. So this is the thought process that they do what they do. And this is what is, along with the cyber security, they have both the cyber offensive and cyber defensive in their capability. So please understand as to what kind of threat we are going to deal with, and do we have the deterrence and dominance capability. Next, they said first after entering space, next step is capability to exploit the space. We in India are not yet able to do the kind of exploitation that we want, and most of it is peaceful exploitation as of today, not about the war waging capability in that front. What they have done is their entire thing is about recce, surveillance, battle strike, support, and all communication. Everything is to the military usage of the space assets, which is for all Army, Navy, Air Force, as well as the strategic force they have. So they cater for all, and this is where they are moving around. And the last thing in this is, after having entered space, exploited space, now is last step they have to control the space. These are the three steps they work, and they are already at the level of controlling space. So now we must see where we stand, what is our threat level, and this way industry will have to put their minds together in coordination with the armed forces, and do we have the capability to counter this and create a space deterrence for our country that we can do for the China. And that's obviously their capability to control the space. They have the ground-based asset, ASAT capability, co-orbital, anti-satellite, and direct energy weapons, whole lot of things that we have spoken about in the last 2 days, and we are likely to speak. So this is what it is, and I'll just sum up with just 2 more things. One is the desired capability. Then based on all this, what is the desired capability we need to have? So will it be rapid space launch capability? Do we need to develop that? Where we are today, and can we develop that? That is one. Second is the balance of offensive defensive capability along with the cyber hydrant. This is very important for us. And thirdly, like what Dr. Ajay brought up today morning, that the NAVIC. We are still very far away from establishing the full NAVIC system, which is very important for any of the military operations in the future, because we'll be denied GPS, we'll be denied all kinds of the satellite communication and everything. There is no doubt about it. So self-reliance, Atmanirbharta in this zone is very, very important if we want to exploit the space and create a space deterrence at least, if not space dominance. Then lastly, I'll leave you people with just three moot questions that we just wanted to think about. In nuclear deterrence, there is an escalation ladder. Will that escalation ladder or similar escalation will work in the space deterrence? Think about it. Secondly, like in nuclear exploitation, there can be a control zone, radiation control zone can be created. That's good. But in this case of space, if the space warfare and space dominance takes place in some kind of asset destruction, do we have any kind of capability to control the debris? The country that is creating the destruction, can they control the debris not to hit their own satellites? How will it go? So there is no control mechanism as that. So while it's good to have space dominance, but the effect of that debris, how will it affect? And lastly, the thing, the space assets, all the space assets, how will they pile up in the space and all the kind of the thing the chair was talking about? How will it happen? So these are the three things that we need to talk about when we talk about space dominance, space deterrence for the future. That's all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, I mainly work in the area of safe and sustainable operations management, that is to ensure safety and sustainability of outer space activities. This is mainly a civilian domain, but even though I work, this is all meant for peaceful purposes. Deterrence is the greatest enabler of peace. That is what history has taught us time and again. So I will talk about the kind of activities which we carry out in ISRO to ensure the safety of our space assets. Over the past few decades, we have developed a robust framework of conjunction assessment to safeguard our space assets, both spacecraft as well as launch vehicle. We continuously carry out conjunction assessment to estimate any kind of close approach risk with our operational satellites, whether it's operating in low Earth orbit, geostationary orbit, and even in the deep space objects like Chandrayaan and Mukherjee. And we routinely do collision avoidance maneuvers to make sure that they do not get hit by any other orbiting objects. And for launch vehicles, we time the liftoff in such a way that during the ascent phase or during its deorbiting phase, it doesn't encounter any kind of passing debris. And we also do re-entry analysis. That is, we analyze the predict the atmospheric re-entry timing of the low Earth orbit objects, so that we can do a post-facto analysis and attribute the parent object in case there is some surviving debris which impact the Earth. That is the kind of work we have been doing here. Now, this brings us to the concept of space situational awareness. That is an overarching and comprehensive understanding of the situation in outer space, because our space assets are vulnerable to various environmental threats, which can be of natural origin or even the anthropogenic origin. And especially, not all actors have very benign intentions, so our assets are nowadays becoming increasingly vulnerable to this kind of threats as well. So for space situational awareness, we always have, there are two elements which are involved, that is nowcasting. We have to have a continuous perception of the environment within a certain time and within this volume of space, and also project it in future. That is nowcasting and forecasting. These are the main elements which are involved. And space domain awareness is extension of space situational awareness, because it also incorporates certain level of intelligence or gathering mechanism into SSA and augments the data. Basically, it attributes the cause of a particular activity and finds out whether the intention of the activity was friendly or hostile. So that is the kind of connotation which is associated with it, and it's definitely not within the civilian domain. It requires military intelligence to be integrated into space situational awareness. Now, coming to the strengthening part of SSA, with the changing landscape of space activities, where we have actors of diverse interest embarking into it. We first of all, we need to have a number of observational facilities to observe such objects, because the number is skyrocketing with time. And these facilities must be distributed across the globe, commensurate with the number of objects increase. And presently what happens is most of the facilities are located in the northern hemisphere, and because of the way the land mass is distributed, we don't have much facilities right now in the southern hemisphere. So that is one thing which which is lacking in the area of SSA. Another point is the low inclination objects are also not tracked very well by existing facilities, whether it is US Spacecom or even other facilities, because there are not many tracking stations there. And third thing is we also need to have some sort of augmentation of this kind of facilities by space-based observatories. That actually can help to complement the data. And most of the legacy systems are not really suited to track the objects which are now being launched. And they're all maneuverable objects, and some of the objects are endowed with low thrust maneuvering capability. You cannot use traditional flight dynamics rules to predict their path unless you really know what kind of intention and what kind of maneuver they are going to perform. That is one more thing. And finally, we need to fuse data which are acquired from disparate sources. Some of the sources can be from a radar, or can be optical telescope, or some other means. So this is another challenge which needs to be addressed. And smaller satellites are one of the, it actually helps a lot for the startups and other new entrants to get into the space business, but it becomes very challenged because they're really difficult to track, and most of them are not endowed with any kind of active or tracking facilities. Finally, when effective space situational awareness requires collaboration, because no country on its own can do it because of the limitation of geographical location as well as the vast extent of space. So like-minded nations, coordination and collaboration with like-minded nation is another aspect which we must concentrate on. And as I have talked about the vulnerability of our civilian space assets, it is high time that we build more and more resilient architecture. Basically, the idea is not to put all the eggs in the same basket. Instead of going for a bigger satellite, think of a smaller satellite on distributed systems, even in terms of command and control, not to be concentrated at one particular geographic location, but have certain distributed control kind of things. And of course, I will resonate whatever was talked about, the cyber hardening and other vulnerability aspects that has to be addressed. And we also need some sort of paradigm shifts, like we need to have lighter-weight structures or some sort of more agile architectures, so that in case there are some pursuant satellite or something which is trying to capture a live asset, there should be some capability to dodge that kind of threat. That also entails having some level of onboard collision avoidance capability, which we need to think about in future. And finally, these satellites can be also equipped with micro thrusters and other things, and have certain level of provisions for rendezvous docking, on-orbit servicing, and all other kind of facilities, so that in case of any mishap, there will be some provision to again restore their services. And responsive space program is another aspect, because in case of any kind, that helps some sort of graceful degradation. if one of the assets are out, we can quickly launch another satellite or something, and within a week's time or something, within a very short frame of time to replace them. Finally, all these things can come to a fruition when we have very good private and public collaboration, and that is the enabler of very good. That is the enabler of burgeoning space ecosystem, and this is true for space deterrence and space domination also. And another area I'd like to just touch upon is that now recently there has been a renewed interest to explore the cislunar and other deep space regions. And there will be only a matter of time when many of the other nations will eye this region for exploiting their resources. And this region may again emerge to be a place of contention, and that is one region to be looked into. So with that thought, I'll end my talk. Thank you for the opportunity.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity. So regarding the space warfare, the modern art of warfare has extended beyond the conventional army, navy and air force, and it's gone to space. So satellites have played an important role in providing data and communication for reconnaissance purpose and many other activities. But it is also important to note that launch sets any launch vehicle or the launch sets node for all of these activities. It is important to have a launch vehicle that is not only efficient and reliable to place the satellites in strategic positions, but also it should be agile in order to maneuver through the complexities of space. This capability can be achieved if we have the ability to launch anywhere, anytime. At Technical, we give an importance to that by at Technical, we can do that by providing launch on demand. We want to highlight on this part as, we should be able to launch at any given time, and in order, if there is any threat or any other threat that we are supposed to control, we should be able to deploy on demand. And also, we should be agility is the heart of in the heart of all of it. We should be able to launch on demand, and we at Technical we have a concept called Dhanush, where we'll be launching from anywhere. All we need is a barren land where we'll be launching through a mobile launch pad. So this type of agility will help us launching more frequently, and also any nation that has equipped with both solid propellants and liquid propulsion will become a space superpower. So we are planning on doing a fully liquid propulsion system complementing ISRO's solid propulsion that will help our country to become a space superpower. I want to conclude on the note that launch vehicles not only are just for launching the satellites in the orbit, but also they play a major role in order to have a space deterrent posture of any nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Many thanks for this organizer. So, yeah, this panel is actually discussing about space warfare and space deterrence and space dominations. Everybody's mentioning about that SSA and launch vehicles and all those things, but we have to consider how that in-orbit servicing has to be important or ensure that dominance. How it is be useful for that in-orbit servicing. So orbit aid is actually, we are doing in-orbit refueling for these satellite life extensions and building a fuel station with a network of tanker satellites in different orbits. So recently, ISRO chief has announced India's aspiration to become a strong nation. That amount of size, its satellite fleet is not enough, and it should be increased 10 times what we have today. Shows that we have started our dominations, and also in next 5 years we are launching another 50 spice satellites in the period of 5 years. And lots of geosatellites also planned. The geosatellites will considerably enhance the communication capability of the Indian Army by providing mission critical and beyond the line of sight communication to troops and formation, as well as weapon and airborne platforms. For example, GSAT-7 is launched 2013, if I am not wrong. It is actually Rukmini. It's for Indian Navy, especially. So that launch cost for that satellite cost for that satellite is 185 crore, and it is actually launched through French Guyana. The foreign launch cost is 485 crore, and if you have to and 2018 and GSAT-7 launched. 7A it's launched from India through GSLV. So it has 2,500 weight of satellites, and it also has again same cost. But if you have to replace the satellites and again, it's again large amount of budget is needed. To avoid that replacement things, and to avoid that debris, and to ensure that satellite sustainability, ensure that to ensure our safeguard and assets in space, we have to incorporate our refueling services in all our satellites. That is most important. Why it is so? As everybody is mentioning, so debris maybe it will be a problem for deterrence, and so if you are using that in orbit refueling things, it will be avoided. Definitely, it will be avoid that debris generations, and it can be extend the life many years. For that, Orbitaid is developed proprietary docking and integrated docking and refueling mechanisms, which can dock any satellites and do the refueling for multiple propellants. And for that, what we are using the satellites now, it is we have to use it in different way. So the satellite is actually the geosatellites have less number of transponder and a huge number of it has a more fuel capacities. What Orbitaid is suggesting is actually you can reduce the fuel capacity, and we make that on demand fuel available in the space, and you can increase that transponder so that more communication can be happen through one satellites without multiple instead of multiple satellites. So you can use that when you have that incorporate that refueling capacity, and you can do a number of maneuverabilities. It's not only that geosatellites can be only one position, and you can increase that. You can do that lots of maneuverability. So it is very much is important to incorporate not only that in-orbit refuelings. To start with in-orbit servicings, you have to work on that in-orbit servicing. You have to start with in-orbit refillings, and as we go for assembly and repair and maintenance. So this will ensure our dominance in space and enhance our capabilities. Thank you.
Right. Now that the panelists have spoken, so I'll just sum up the key takeaways of all the panelists, and thereafter we will seek your comments and recommendations and suggestions. So, as far as the space warfare, deterrence and domination is concerned, catalog for space collision avoidance, creation of the catalog itself is an achievement. And whenever we start creation of a catalog, this will take a considerable time. Now, like it was spoken, it is difficult for a country to do it alone. So yes, obviously you have to collaborate with the like-minded nations, friendly foreign countries. But the creation of a space catalog to track the space objects is extremely important. For space safety, like I said in the beginning, there are so many space objects, so many spacecraft, so much of debris is there in space, and that too, whatever we read in the media is beyond 10 centimeters size, because the ability is to track more than 10 centimeters, although it is claimed that Americans have capability to track 5 centimeters. So if those are the space objects, we know what happened, what is happening to the mega constellations, how they are getting hit by the debris, how the International Space Station, if you stay in touch with the space news, if I am not wrong, it was on 13 November when the International Space Station has to be maneuvered by 3,000 feet higher to avoid space debris, and there are many related news articles as far as debris is concerned. So we work on to the collision avoidance, conjunction analysis and collision avoidance to ensure safety of our assets, which is extremely important, and hence for the safety itself, if nothing else, space situation awareness. Number of constellations coming up, it was spoken, whether it is Starlink, whether it is GW59, thousands of satellites in primarily in LEO and MEO constellations. Space deterrence, level of deterrence, enabled war and space denial war. I think a very interesting topic that was brought out, how space has enabled the operations and how the denial of these services is going to affect us. So space enabling versus space denial. The topic of cyber hardening came up and it was addressed by various speakers, and I think no one can overemphasize the aspect of cyber hardening as far as all the satellites that are being launched are concerned. So I think that is something that all of us understand. Another interesting thing that came up during the discussion is space escalation matrix. How do we escalate? What is the escalation matrix that we have? Space is one field that, what about the international legal conventions? Yes, Armistice Accord, open-ended working group, although that has ended few weeks and months ago. But what about the various legal conventions? And I come back to basic question of space escalation. So space escalation matrix is something, interestingly it came up. Now, in case, firstly, space is another one field wherein, you don't know whether this satellite is being used for a particular purpose over a particular territory. There is no sovereignty. There is no geographical sovereignty as far as any satellite is concerned. It is by mere orbital dynamics. It has to go over whether it is SSPO or whether it is an inclined orbit. While legally an aircraft cannot fly over any territory as during operations, but no one can prevent a satellite from flying over another territory, because satellite has to fly because of its mere orbital dynamics. So now what happens if a commercial satellite is being used for a particular country to give inputs? Do you target commercial satellites? Do you raise the escalation matrix? So these are very interesting questions that, once you go through the various conflicts that are happening around the globe, these interesting thoughts come to us, and I think we, a mix of academia and professionals, we need to take it on. SDA and extension of SSA, very well spoken. The ecosystem of SSA. SSA is a very fashionable word, and most of us talk of SSA. But how do you achieve SSA? How many sensors are required, whether it is ground-based or whether it is space-based? What about telescopes? Where all you base them? How is the ecosystem that you create? Which is the fusion software? And as far as we are concerned, any country would like to have indigenous fusion software because of various other strategic implications as you think more of it. So how to create SSA? What is the ecosystem of the SSA? What are the sensors that that you have to develop? And the cost. If you merely see the cost of development of space-based systems, whether ground-based or otherwise, then you will realize the cost that is associated with it, the gestation period that is associated with it, hence the importance of private-public partnership and requirement for all of us to think on SSA. Then Agnikul spoke of capability for launch vehicles and how the correlation of launch vehicles with space deterrence importance of launch on demand, and another interesting thing which came up was mobile launch pad. Yes, I think this is something that we need to work with. At least we need to start putting our heads on ground and start working on paper. That how is it possible? Launch on demand, once again, I would say at the cost of repetition is a fashionable word. But how do you achieve launch on demand? Where do you store the spacecraft? Where do you store the propellant? How do you store the various components of the launch system? That is an infrastructure ecosystem in itself to be developed. So yes, once again, for the LOD, I think it's time to give a thought. Last speaker, he spoke about the in-orbit servicing, in-orbit refueling, tanker satellites. Once again, if you read the space news, it is all over space news. Whether you talk of inspector satellites, whether you talk of tanker satellites, whether you talk of maintenance in space, the linking of RPO with all this. So once again, I think this is a very interesting field. And he linked it to debris avoidance. He linked it to avoidance of debris generation as far as these in-orbiting servicing and refueling is concerned, combined with maintenance. So I think as far as this panel is concerned, I'm very thankful to them because a lot of interesting concepts came up. And now I will open it to any suggestions, recommendations, inputs from your side. Yeah, Bajpai.
Every second there is a SSA update your radars are taking, and 5 minutes it takes to propagate. But when you look at a sphere of 4 pi steradian, to complete coverage of 4 pi steradian, how much time it takes?
I think I get the question. So we maintain an independent catalogue, which is the Air Vice Marshal was talking about. A catalogue is the way you maintain a space domain awareness SSA. To build that, it's just that constant surveillance of all systems, adding to the library and building that situational awareness up each radar pass that we get of every object. To talk a little bit about maintaining a catalogue, well, it does come down to a number of astrodynamical type situations there where we only do it for low Earth orbit with the radars, but we do prioritise our customer requirements. But then we also look for the secondaries, and this is where the space debris and junk become a problem. If we've got a critical conjunction coming up, the radars will be biased to look for those objects so we can update the conjunction analysis and provide that to our customers. So this is just a continuous, it's basically a beautiful set of algorithms. It's all autonomous. The radars work autonomous, that we just monitor them. They basically continue to build the picture, if you like. And that system is just a beautiful network of algorithms slowly building up and maintaining a picture over time. So hopefully that answers, that question.
Thank you, Ekam to Terry, but question is still not answered. My question is, to cover 360 degrees what you see in a plane, in a 3-dimensional it's 4 pi steradian. To cover 4 pi steradian, how much time it takes? It's within 5 minutes, within 1 hour, within 2 hours.
Okay, so everything's going around the Earth every 90 minutes at different inclinations. They go to different radar sites, and it's an aggregation of this picture. So when you build a catalogue, you build it over time and then you maintain it. Now you also look for new objects in space and you add those to your catalogue. Again, custody is now the main thing you need to worry about, holding the custody of objects in low Earth orbit. The other secret to this is having radars dispersed all around the world at different latitudes so you see different inclinations. I can tell you the most difficult inclination to observe at the moment is the equator. And that's because there's very little coverage around the equatorial band. But all high inclination satellites, sun synchronous, and those sort of things, they're well covered. And we actually are updating those, every 2 or 3 hours, really, when you look at the numbers. So I actually need to show you to explain how the catalogue maintenance works.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah. So I've been told because of time, so we'll just take 2 more questions if you don't mind. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Question to Ekram Delhi. Since we talked about maneuvering satellites, I would like to know, not as a matter of academic interest, but as a matter of statistics, what is the maximum maneuvering of a satellite that has been observed and recorded ever? And what is the normal kind of maneuvering that we see nowadays? The next question would be, if we have to design a satellite for military purposes, does maneuverability have to be a necessary QR to make it sort of a military grade? And if so, what are the problems involved in that? Of course, fuel and cost would be a factor, but what are the other variables? And third question to Dr. Bulbul. Now we know that we have an SSA cooperative agreement with the USA, but there are so many commercial SSA providers across the globe. Are we tapping these services? What is the capability in India? Could you enlighten us? Thank you.
So Terry, you first.
Yeah, quickly on manoeuvring. I mean, that's how long's a piece of string question. Obviously, we see launches into low Earth orbit that actually do geostationary transfers, and our friends building these orbital vehicles are going to be doing large manoeuvres. But what do we typically see? Well, I can tell you what, we've just recently seen the Chinese space plane launched just before Christmas, leveled out around about 320 kilometres, and then stabilised its orbit about 330, 340, and it was on Republic Day. So happy Republic Day, 26th of January, that it raised its orbit up to 600. So that's quite a big change of SMA and circularised at that. So that's okay, I'm getting ready for operations type orbit change. Then the other question is, what is normal? Well, what is normal is small manoeuvres continually in a low Earth orbit for maintenance of orbit, for collision avoidance, or for experimentation or manoeuvre. And that is the constant drumbeat, if you like, of what we see.
Yeah. Dr. Bulbul, will you like to begin? He's talking of collaboration with other countries.
Yeah, I think the question was on what is happening in the SSA front for India.
Collaboration with private
Collaboration with private companies. Okay, in India, what we are really trying to do is to build the indigenous capability so that we can have less dependence on external sources of data. But in order to build the capability, what we need is first we need to benchmark, we need to qualify our systems. At the same time, we can also, of course, use the other sources of data to augment and that will help us to make more informed decision making. Right now, we have taken up the project Netra, and it has 3 elements. One, radar to be set up in the northeastern side of India, and one optical telescope is going to come up in Hanley. And there is a control center where we intend to process all the observational data to do our orbit determination, object correlation, and other things, and catalog building of our indigenous catalog building, and then finally use it for our conjunction assessment process. In that process, under this framework, what we intend to do is we will be ingesting data from US Spacecom as well as from private players, as Terry has told, Leo Labs data or something. If we can get, we will be using it, and we will be also using our own indigenous observational centers data. Does that answer your question?
Okay, last question, please.
It's more like a comment. I am Arindradit Chaudhary. I'm a professor at IIT Bombay, and I also have a startup called InSpacity. Although we aspire to build cities in space, we start off with ISAM. I just wanted to qualify that in this space warfare, deterrence, and domination, we should not underestimate that if we do somehow make space unusable in the future, thinking that it is not that important, we'll be stuck in an age that is like the dark ages, either the Iron Age or something like that, and we'll be doing a huge disservice to all of our progeny. We'll never be able to get out of Earth after this. It'll be a huge task to clean all of that up. So Terry's work and Bulbul's work is very important. And that cannot be rebuilt. So Hiroshima today is again rebuilt, and it's very much bustling in some way. But this cannot be undone.
Right. Thank you so much. Just the last question because he raised his hand first.
Thank you, speakers, for this really enlightening lecture. My name is Ameya Kelkar from the Center for Land Warfare Studies. My basic question is, given in the last couple of years, Chinese ASAT tests have thrown the problem of space debris around, and many nations are concerned over it. My question is, to what extent do we see the use of space debris as an instrument of war? As in, like, how an adversary can use space debris to just launch it on an adversary's assets? And what kind of mitigation measures are we thinking of in this regard, sir?
Sir, do you like to say that?
For the panel, sir.
The look, I can tell you one thing: the generation of space debris is letting something out of a box and you can't put it back. Once space debris is formed, people talk about active debris removal and other such things. Very, very difficult, nearly impossible to do. So the greatest threat, I agree with the professor here, and any of these things, is the generation of more debris. Space junk will be catastrophic for all mankind. The challenge, I think, is to we say three things about controlling the environment. Firstly, don't make any more space junk or debris. So like preventing, and I know Australia is part of this, but not signing the MOU for not conducting destructive anti-satellite tests, number one. Actually look at means of if you're doing space control, do it with non-kinetic means, okay? Avoid space junk and debris at all costs. You still can control your environment, number two. And of course, then you need to be able to, regardless of what happens in strategic competition, which I think is occurring and obviously could escalate any time, there's still a really important role for ISRO, for Leo Labs, everyone else to think about, and that is how do we help civil, commercial and other operators navigate in space, because they can't leave it. It's a blended environment. The civil, commercial and military operations will all occur in one place. In air warfare, you can clear the aircraft out of the battle space. On the sea, the same, not in space. So that's a real problem.
So I think your question was how it is going to, you are going to use it as an instrument for war.
Yes, or an adversary.
Yeah.
You're talking about scuttle space. Unfortunately, there are some think tanks around the world in non-aligned nations that talk about using like nuclear devices to scuttle mega constellations. The Chinese have been talking about this. The way to take out Starlink is actually to detonate nuke and take it out in an EMP. But the consequences of that are what the professor's talking about. We'll be all stuck on Earth for the next 50 to 100 years because the debris fields that we associate with that will be unmanageable.
Kelkar was just saying that it can be used as instrument of war. See, instrument of war to be used is to cause the damage to the enemy assets. Okay? And your assets should be protected. Even in nuclear warfare it is like that. But here, you have no control over it. Once you create the debris, whom will it go and hit? How will it go and hit? You have no control over it. So your own assets will be under threat, and that's why exactly the professor from IIT brought out. That we start creating like this, everything will go after that. That's what I brought out in my speech when I spoke. Okay, this is where the huge, what kind of deterrence you want to create. Do you want to create this deterrence? It is actually deterrence for you only. Because your assets are as vulnerable along with this. So I don't think this will, so this is the kind of it Terry has brought out. I don't think this can be used as an instrument of war. And that's what, thank you.
Right. So you want to say something?
I like to add something else. Maybe that debris removal or debris generation reduces. Yeah, there is a recent penalty also happened from that committee. So it is a very less penalty, but that is in history is the first time. That is the first one, and there's from 25 years to they reduced to 5 years. They have to keep all the debris within the 5 years. They have to remove that things. So, and in future satellites, all the satellite has to be adopted debris removal plates. So we can uncontrolled or controlled debris, we can remove it easily. So that is possible.
Right. Thank you so much. I would like to thank the panelists, SIA, for keeping us here, and the panelists and the audience. I know there are a lot of hands that were raised for questions, but I would request you, because of time, we can interact during the lunch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, esteemed chair. Thank you, esteemed panelists. With that, we conclude this panel discussion, which was entitled Space Warfare, Space Deterrence, and Space Domination. We quickly move on to our next panel discussion, which is comms strategies for modern military operations under contested and EV environment. I request the panelists of this session to kindly take their seats back amongst the audience.